In business today, three things to know. First, hand in hand, a China-Australia trade deal that's really about sticking it to the U.S., how new economic openness from China is resetting the world order. Then, drug blitz. Federal agents inspect NFL training facilities looking for wrongly prescribed prescription drugs. It's another knock on a league that's having a tough year, except when it comes to making money. And looking for Amelia, how the hunt for famed aviatrix Amelia Earhart has led to big business for aircraft hunters. But so far, no Amelia. Arise Exchange starts now. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Schmertz. We'll talk more about that historic trade deal between China and Australia and why it's so significant in a moment. But first, word came from the European Central Bank leader that he will stay the course on stimulus for the Eurozone, and that, for the most part, helped stabilize stocks. Not a whole lot of action on Wall Street today. Let's take a look at the final numbers. The Dow did close up about 13 and change to 17,647. The S&P 500 up $1.50 to 2041. The Nasdaq pulling back 1754. Some of the top stocks we're watching today: Urban Outfitters announcing an earnings miss for its third quarter, even though total sales hit a record. EPS of 35 cents was about 6 cents below expectations. Urban Outfitters down 2 pennies. Greater demand for chicken helped drive Tyson Foods to a solid third quarter. Third quarter EPS of 87 cents beat estimates, and Tyson closing up 237. And Facebook said to be developing a new office-oriented social media site, just what we need in the office, another time suck. The new platform is set to rival professional networking website LinkedIn. Facebook closing down at 77 cents. And taking a look at commodities, gold up $1 and oil down another 32 cents to $75.50. Some economic data: while manufacturing edged up in October, declines in mining and the auto sector brought down industrial production by 0.1% for the month. It is being called a landmark trade deal between China and a Western nation, and it's not with the U.S. China has signed a sweeping trade package with Australia. China is the world's second largest economy, and Australia is one of the U.S.'s biggest allies. This deal comes as the U.S. has frozen out China in a separate trade deal it's been working on with Asian countries. So, does this mean more than just an agreement between China and Australia? Thomas Mingone from Capital Management Group of New York is here to talk about this, as well as some news about Japan and some stocks as well. Tom, welcome to Arise Exchange.
Thank you, Andrew.
Good to have you here. So what is the deal with this deal between China and Australia? What are they trying to get at?
Well, I think if you look at China's growth and what they're trying to fuel, it's tremendous demand for the rich natural resources that Australia has to offer. So I think a lot of the motivation for this deal comes from the natural resources that are in Australia, and if you couple that with the geographic proximity, I think the deal just made a lot of sense.
And I believe Australia is China's largest trading partner, or certainly up there. And it has been in the works for some 10 years, so it's not like a surprise that China went out there and pulled this out of their hat. But conversely, the U.S. went to Asia to try to nail down its Trans-Asia partnership deal, which excludes China and for the most part walked away empty-handed. So I'm wondering if, from an optics point of view, this sort of puts China a little bit, at least, in the driver's seat.
Well, maybe so. I think, though, it speaks more to the fact that China needs to diversify globally. For example, China creates 50% of the world demand for cement. So that's just an example.
That's 50% of the world demand for cement is in China.
So when you think about the growth and how large a country it is, they're going to need to have assets throughout the globe. I don't think it's fair to think they wouldn't be doing deals like this. So.
And the new economic openness, a good thing for the economy worldwide?
I think so. It's hard to tell. I mean, China's a difficult one to gauge because there's not a lot of transparency around what they do. So generally speaking, it should be good, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I want to turn to Japan for a moment. You know, we woke up this morning learning that Japan is in a recession again. The question is, do we care? I mean, is it significant anymore? I mean, Japan has had such problems for so long.
Well, I mean, we care. They're the third largest economy in the world. I don't think we're surprised by it. Yep. I mean, you have a declining population, increasing debt, and we are concerned that Japan could be one of the biggest threats to the global economy.
Yeah, I mean, I've been reading about that some saying it's the first domino. Europe, of course, is some parts of Europe in a recession as well. And so the rest of the world, and we've said this before, some economists have said that the neighborhood overall is pretty lousy. The U.S. just has the best looking house in that neighborhood.
That is true. And so far, we've been able to continue to grow despite the rest of the world, but at some point, we're going to need them to pick it up.
Okay, so when you look at stocks right now, where do you see the market going over the next few months or so? We had a little bit of a setback in early October. Is that done with, do you think?
You know, it's hard to say. There's going to be volatility as the norm, I think, going forward. There's a lot of headline risk out there, as you know. We had a 9% drop in October, just shy of a definition of a correction, but felt like a correction to most people, although it was short-lived. So it's always hard to say what the markets will do in the short term, and certainly we encourage investors to take a long-term view with their own portfolios. But we've already hit our year-to-date forecast, or actually for the end of the year, where we thought the markets would end up. So we're not expecting big things either way.
When you talk about headline risk, is the risk with the economy or is it a political risk right now overseas?
Well, a little both. I mean, some of the stories like over the weekend, the beheadings and things like that, just put people in a generally bad mood about investing in the world at large. So I think some of those things have more power in the headlines than they do actually affect the economy, but the markets...
Those are usually short-term pops.
Exactly.
But okay. Thomas Mingone with Capital Management Group of New York. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Hope to see you here soon.
Great.
Coming up, federal authorities put the NFL on the defense over prescription drugs. You're watching Rise Exchange. Stay with us.
There is a reason Africa is called the new frontier. What was once potential is now an opportunity ready to be seized. Once revered for our resources, today's wealth lies in our people. People who build the cities that shape the future. People who know an idea in one place means business in another. A generation for whom technology means there are no borders, no boundaries. We are the new lions in a brave new world, kings of the urban jungle. And there's a bank that puts the world in our pocket and the future in our hands. UBA, Africa's global bank.
Welcome back to Rise Exchange. Over the weekend, the National Football League faced a new, unexpected visiting team, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency, following a class action lawsuit filed by 1,300 former NFL players who are alleging NFL doctors routinely violated federal drug laws. Agents inspected the locker rooms of several NFL teams. At issue, whether league doctors are illegally prescribing drugs to players. Sports editor Mike Bako from thedailynational.com is here with the impact this investigation means for a league already under the microscope. Mike, any surprise here that the DEA took this action?
I think it's surprising the way that it's now being publicized. Normally, you would think that they would kind of do this under the cover of darkness and then make their reporting and their findings. But I think when you're dealing with an NFL team and you see DEA agents, kind of hard not to have that be on everyone's radar.
And was this a raid, or was this, as far as you know, the NFL opening the doors voluntarily?
It was somewhere in between. We had some reporters at MetLife Stadium that saw them milling about, and this was something where they just came and spoke to the 49ers medical staff, trainers, personnel. What they're really looking at right now is, does everything kind of mark off all the check marks? Mm-hmm. Are the physicians giving the shots, the painkillers, the things like that, and not the trainers, not other team personnel? Because that's what a lot of these players, most notably Jim McMahon, are alleging, that over the course of their career that they were just willy-nilly handed out pills and they didn't really even know what they were taking or who they were taking them from.
Do we know whether the agents actually went into the lockers of players?
We don't know whether they went into the lockers of the players. What they were really focusing on were team personnel, because that's where the lawsuit is against, and that's who they are investigating, because it's not the players that they're investigating whether they have illegal contraband.
It's the doctors.
It's the doctors. It's the team officials.
And so in this lawsuit that these 1,300, and that's a lot of players, by the way, are saying that they were illegally prescribed drugs, illegally given drugs. What is the accusation?
Basically,
here?
all of the above. Illegally given drugs that they were not told what they were from bottles that were unmarked. Basically, other team personnel giving them medicines, prescriptions that they didn't really know what they were. Now, granted, there should be some onus on the players to ask, what are you giving me? How much are you giving me? And knowing how much of an intake you're doing.
So is there an accusation here that these doctors are Dr. Feelgoods, basically, that you got hurt and we gave you some drugs to pop?
It's the culture of the NFL.
Yeah.
Players are playing on non-guaranteed contracts. Players want those millions, want that playing time to get those millions. So if it takes taking a couple years off their life, taking a couple years off of their career so they could get those contracts, so they could get those signing bonuses to set themselves up for the rest of their life. But you look at a guy like Jim McMahon, who, if you remember from the 80s, probably the most flamboyant, from a wordsmith standpoint, one of the great interviews. And now the guy can barely leave his house in Arizona without wearing glasses. He forgets where he is. He forgets who he is. That's not the image that the NFL wants out there.
Yes. So how is the NFL responding to this quote investigation?
Well, as with anything that comes out of Roger Goodell's mouth, it's a little bit of lip service, but they are saying that they are complying, that they do want to get to the bottom of this, that they do have their players' best interest at heart.
Do you think the NFL needs to say at some point, hey, we were wrong and did some bad things in the past, but now we're going to clean up our act, from concussions to drugs to all of these things? Because if they keep saying and they keep churning out information saying, no, we didn't do this, or it was a case here, no one's going to buy that.
People are buying it, though, because people are continuing to watch the games. Ratings are high. But the NFL did do that with concussions, and they did do that with player injuries to the tune of $750 million. But that's just a drop in the bucket. So even though they are, in a way, accepting responsibility, not declaring guilt, but it's really just a drop in the bucket.
I don't know how you grab all the fans and say, if you're really outraged, stop watching.
Well, you listen to a guy like Malcolm Gladwell, who's basically saying that it's an abomination that the NFL is even in existence anymore.
Yeah.
You think about who will be playing in the NFL, who will be playing football 10, 15 years from now. Will it just become a gladiator sport of people that don't really care about their health? It may become like an MMA where you want people to get hurt on the field. I think that's where some people think that we're going with the NFL. But when you still have guys like Tom Brady and Peyton Manning.
You have phenomenal athletes.
You have phenomenal
and maybe
athletes.
that's what they need. What happened, maybe the hockey model, whereby the poor athletes who are known as sort of the enforcers were eventually weaned out of the league. And maybe that's the model the NFL has to look at, is a better game from an athletic standpoint with less violence.
I don't know if that's possible. Bigger, faster, stronger guys. You look at a guy like Rob Gronkowski. He's a tight end. I mean, we've not seen the likes of some of these athletes anywhere. And when you get those guys hitting each other, all bets are off.
All right, Mike, we're going to have you on as this investigation, no doubt, will keep going.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike Bako. Time now for our business ticker stories making headlines across the nation and the world. The Bernie Madoff recoveries will now top $10 billion. The New York trustee recovering money for thousands of investors taken in by the Ponzi schemer announced today an additional $500 million settlement with two financial funds that invested with Madoff. The settlement with the two feeder funds, Herald and Premio, is one of the largest obtained by the trustee since the fraud occurred in 2008. Madoff is in the slammer for 150 years. It's the largest merger Monday of the year, with two enormous deals worth over $100 billion in pharmaceuticals. Actavis has agreed to pay $66 billion for Allergan, the maker of Botox, Allergan, the maker of Botox, while in the energy sector, Halliburton appears to have struck a deal to buy its smaller rival Baker Hughes for nearly $35 billion. That deal coming together rather quickly as oil prices drop 30% since June. The deadline for GM accident victims has been extended. The administrator for the General Motors Faulty Ignition Switch Compensation Fund announcing last night that the deadline to file would be extended to January 31st. So far, the program has approved 33 death claims. Low earners have been getting bigger pay hikes for the past year, according to data from the payroll processor ADP. The average hourly pay for younger workers earning less than $20,000 a year climbed nearly 5.5%. That's 0.5% more than older, higher-paid employees earning between $20,000 and $50,000 a year. The shift could boost economic growth since lower-paid workers tend to spend most of their paychecks. And get this, he is the youngest Microsoft certified specialist in the world. Ian Kourouche, who lives with his family in the UK, passed Microsoft's tough engineering exam when he was just 5 years old. The boy was introduced to computers at the age of 3 by his father. He's a quick study. His father's an IT consultant. Now that he's 6, Ian has set up his own computer network at his home and hopes to one day launch E-Valley, his version of America's Silicon Valley in the UK. That's ambitious for a 6-year-old. Probably will do it by the time he's 8. It's no secret that 1 out of every 2 marriages end in divorce, but unless you know the people getting divorced, the dirty little secrets of the marriage generally stay out of public view, unless you're super wealthy. Then we all hear about it, and we talk about it, like the recent $1 billion divorce case. Attorney Lori Ann Douglas, a partner at Moses & Singer, joins us now to discuss these cases and how they make it into the press to begin with. Welcome to Arise Exchange. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
You know, there are these cases, for example, the woman who got a $1 billion order by a judge, yes, and she is saying it's not enough.
That's right.
This was the Ham case, where Ham is a well-known oil tycoon. Does she have a case here?
She probably does. While $1 billion may seem a lot to you and me, it's not a lot to her. The $1 billion, or close to $1 billion settlement really only represents about 6% of his net worth.
Yeah, they said he's about $18 billion in the bank.
And they had a 26-year marriage, and he was only worth $50 million when she met him.
And the key is not so much the wealth growth during the marriage, that's part of it, but that she appears to have contributed to it. At least that's her case, because she worked for the company.
Yes, not only that she contributed it, but that he did also. In Oklahoma, the state where this case originates, their marital laws state that if there's a windfall in profits for the marital assets, that the spouse does not get the benefit of that. So he had an interesting defense, because his defense was, hey, it was just market factors that created all this wealth. Had nothing to do with me. Very interesting, because I'm sure if he was arguing to his board of directors for why he should get a raise, for example, he would say it's because I'm doing all the work. Exactly.
You know, there's been a big case here in New York that has been talked about in the media, of course, because we love talking about these financial people. Sage and I think Christine Kelly, who the judge had actually said to them, look, I read the complaint, you should settle this privately. And then they didn't. The complaint came out. Drug abuse, orgies, wife swapping, this list of things that they accused each other of doing. The question is, as a divorce attorney, how do people get to the point where they would rather have their public laundry aired than settle?
Well, unfortunately, sometimes the parties are probably not so forthcoming to their attorneys as to what are all the things that could possibly come out.
But somebody wrote this complaint.
Of course they did. So I believe the wife is the one that put that out there. So it's one thing to be Bonnie and Clyde when you're doing all your dirt together, but when Bonnie and Clyde get divorced, you take the risk. So she decided, strategy-wise, that it was in her best interest to put it out there. I think her spin was, I did these things because he made me do it. And then it did result in an ultimate settlement, probably a settlement better for her monetarily.
How would you advise celebrity clients then, who maybe come to your office and are going to get divorced? And I know they don't come together generally. That would be easier. One comes to you, the other goes somewhere else.
Right. Well, we always advise our clients to try to settle it outside of the judicial system, because just for these reasons, not only is everything you air your dirty laundry, but the court system is not very flexible. So it's always best to try to negotiate a divorce rather than to go into the courts.
And should you negotiate your divorce before you get married through prenups?
Absolutely.
All divorce lawyers say absolutely get a prenup these days.
Everybody should have a prenuptial agreement, because the prenuptial agreement, just the negotiation of that prenuptial agreement, leads to hopefully a stronger foundation and an understanding as to how finances are going to be addressed and handled during the marriage.
And does every jurisdiction these days accept prenups?
Yes, pretty much. Everyone accepts prenups. Many accept postnuptial agreements, but it's always best to try to negotiate the terms, because prenuptial agreements, they apply not only in divorce, but also when a party dies.
Are you seeing uglier divorces these days, or does it just seem uglier because of social media?
I think it just seems uglier. They're no uglier to those of us that do the work, but they're definitely more interest to people, and there's more access to all the dirt.
All right, Lorianne Douglas, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good conversation. Coming up, forcing an employee to read X-rated emails on the job, that makes one of our top financial executives our favorite person of the day. You're watching the Rise Exchange.
The great thing about Arise Entertainment 360 is that we cover the 360 of entertainment, food, fashion, lifestyle, culture. We're able to cover it all. And the thing I love most about the show is we're able to do a stunning combination of high and low. So we can talk about Rihanna on the red carpet, but we can also speak about high art with people like Sanford Biggers and Hank Willis. We actually spend quality time with our guests, and we really get to know them. It's really intriguing because we get a 360 look at our guests.
Apple unveiled new products today. Did it meet expectations?
Apple stock is up 20%.
The White House says it has proper measures to contain the spread of Ebola.
This seems to be, in some ways, exploding. What are officials saying?
We remain focused on working with our partners on the ground to stop the epidemic.
Enhanced measures have been put in place in Africa and the United States.
This is hitting home in a very real way, and I think, we need to be concerned.
Hello and welcome to Arise America. I'm Debbie Turner-Bell.
I think that people in America do care about what happens throughout the world.
Global warming is probably something that has to be addressed sooner rather than later.
From Somalia and the genocide there, and that's something people don't know about. They have no idea the brevity of that situation.
The first thing I think about when I think of Africa is like war and famine and disease.
And right now with the tsunami that happened or the earthquakes in, Japan, we always look out for other people.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Pull up to the bar. Our liquid lunch today takes us to a pot auction. Over the weekend, marijuana growers gathered in Prosser, Washington, in the state's first ever marijuana auction. A farm located outside of Seattle sold off 500 pounds of pot. The reason? The farm's owner, Randy Williams, wants to take a vacation and needed to unload the merchandise. Jack Ron is one of the pot growers at the auction.
I think it's a good idea. Put your toe in the water, try something like this. He wants to take off early, not be stuck all winter packing this stuff into 1 gram packages. So yeah, I hope he comes out well with it.
If I was to guess what a pot farmer looked like, that's pretty much what it would be. And that takes us to our favorite person of the day, when we bring you one person who grabbed our attention, not for the right reasons. Today, it is the leader of a private equity firm who was accused of making his secretary review some very private emails. Nancy Woods has filed a $4 million lawsuit against Bill Berkman and his firm Associated Partners, claiming that she was required to, quote, read pornographic emails with lewd pictures of scantily clad women as part of her job. Woods claims that the emails were sent between Berkman and a Goldman Sachs banker, who is also known for negotiating contracts with Alex Rodriguez of the Yankees, and that the emails often contained images of unsuspecting women that Berkman allegedly took photos of from a bench across the street from the firm. Well, he gets a lunch break. Berkman's lawyers say the charges are unfounded and are the result of an employee who was fired. But still, Bill Berkman, until proven otherwise, is our favorite person of the day. Coming up, finding Amelia, why the search for Amelia Earhart may be getting closer to a resolution, according to our next guest. You're watching Arise Exchange.
I think media and reporters have a lot to answer for.
AIDS, hunger, people not having running water, the things that we just take for granted.
I think the most important issues in the world today are education and poverty.
Terrorism and war, I guess, is always. It's always an issue, and the quality of life of certain groups of people in certain areas.
I think inequality.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Informative. The U.S. economy is on the right path, and the wizard of the Fed is leading the way.
We started our companies originally to create something that made a positive difference.
Compelling.
I became
very successful, not allowing myself to be average.
Our favorite person of the day when we pick one person who grabbed our attention and not for the right reason. Yeah, he sort of lost all business. Investors came back from the long weekend tanned, rested, and ready to buy stocks. Entertaining money daily, Arise Exchange. What happened to Amelia Earhart and her navigator, Fred Noonan? It's a question that's still unsolved more than 70 years after her plane vanished over the Pacific Ocean on July 2nd, 1937. However, one group has been doggedly searching for her missing plane for decades, turning the search into a virtual industry. And now they claim that they have found a key clue. Rick Gillespie, executive director of the International Group for Historic Aircraft and Recovery, an organization dedicated to promoting aviation archaeology and historic preservation, joins us now with more. Rick, it is a big honor to have you on the program. I've been following the work you guys have been doing for years. So the basic thesis is, as I understand it, Amelia and Fred Noonan crash landed either on or near an unoccupied island off of the coast of Japan. And you have found evidence, you say, that that is actually what happened. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah. In the first place, we're nowhere near Japan. We're 2,000 miles south of Hawaii in the central South Pacific, other side of the Pacific from Japan, north to south. And it wasn't a crash landing. It was a safe landing by all indications. The airplane was landed on the dry reef that surrounds the island, dries at low tide, plenty smooth and flat enough to land on, and sent radio distress calls for the better part of a week. So we know she was on her wheels, able to run an engine, to recharge the battery, the radio worked from.
But Rick, how do you know that she actually sent these distress calls? Because that's in dispute, and so are some of the artifacts that you claim to have found.
There's always going to be dispute about Amelia Earhart. Are you kidding? You know, she was captured by the Japanese. She crashed and sank at sea. And there are people tremendously invested in those theories. What we're doing is following the facts. We know she was sending radio distress calls because we've analyzed the radio distress calls that were heard. Of the 120 alleged calls, 57 of them are credible in that there's no other explanation for where they could have come from. Incidentally, these radio distress calls were widely believed and confirmed at the time in 1937. The U.S. Navy thought they were genuine.
Yeah, it's important to remember that it was the largest Navy search operation ever at the time.
That's right. And they based part of their search on the fact that Pan American Radio Direction Finder stations in Hawaii, Midway, and Wake Island took bearings on these radio distress calls, and the bearings, for the most part, crossed in the Phoenix Islands near this island, Gardner Island, now known as Nikomororo, where we found all this evidence.
Now, you have also been the subject of a Discovery Channel program where you thought that you were going to find the plane underwater. That turned up empty. You've been doing this now for a couple of decades, though. What do you say to the naysayers who say that you're simply perpetuating some sort of false hope that you could actually come up with some evidence?
I ask those naysayers to look at the evidence we've found. And we have abundant evidence from many different sources that all point to the same conclusion. You know, last Friday, I was at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, with 4 world-class forensic scientists reviewing some of the evidence we found, and they were totally supportive. In fact, they went further than I would.
Rick, how do you, this is an expensive operation. How do you fund this?
From the general public. We get no government help. We have no giant commercial corporate sponsors. We raise the money from contributions from the general public.
Do you get TV money from this? Do you get TV money at all from Discovery, for example?
Yeah, sure. We get from time to time.
What do you think? Do you think that there's a vested interest?
The money is public.
It's public money. Okay. So when you talk about this, though, you know, would it not be, you know, it would be kind of cool to find that she actually survived this, but wouldn't that be a terrible ending to this story?
We don't control the ending. You know, whatever happened to her is what happened to her. We go where the facts lead us. Yes, it would be a terrible way to die. But if that's what happened, we should know that. We shouldn't kid ourselves about it.
And, of course, we had to stop, from what I understand, the search efforts because of the pending war at the time, right? So there was a lot of obstacles in the way to finding her.
Not really.
Nope.
1937, the United States was not at war with Japan, didn't know there was a pending war with Japan. the search was carried out as best they could. They made some mistakes, but they weren't hampered by any concern of war.
Rick, we have about 30 seconds left or so. You also, your group basically hunts for aviation artifacts throughout the world. Where do you think this one is going to end up in? When are you going to have some answers?
Well, I hope next summer. We're going back out in June of 2015, and we're hoping that we can find the rest of the airplane. We have one piece. We want the rest of it.
Okay. Rick Gillespie, thank you so much. Pleasure talking to you. Tomorrow on Arise Exchange, the U.S. Senate is expected to take a long-awaited vote Tuesday on approving the Keystone oil pipeline deal. Let's take a look at the markets once again. For the most part, a pretty quiet day on Wall Street. The Dow up about 13 points. The S&P 500 in the green. The NASDAQ pulling back 1754. I'm Andrew Schmertz. Thanks for watching Arise Exchange. We'll see you here tomorrow.